Hey there YouTube, what's going on? My name is Cecil and this is going to be an early game Zetas guide for Galaxy of Heroes. Now with the new movie coming out, I know there's going to be a lot more people swinging into the game, and there might be a lot more people looking for some information on where to go with their Zeta placements. Now if you may not know, a Zeta ability is kind of like an ultimate ability for a character. A lot of characters have them. Some are amazing, some are terrible. Some are more geared for later game characters or later game teams, and some are better in the early game. And that's what we're going to be talking about today, are 10 Zetas that you can confidently go for early on in the game that are going to really set you up to have a strong account. So the very first one we're going to be talking about, and the standout best dark side Zeta in the early game, is going to be Emperor Palpatine's Zeta, Emperor of the Galactic Empire. Now what this does is it makes it so anytime an Empire or Sith ally uses or inflicts a debuff, they're going to also gain 5% turn meter. So what this means is every time Palpatine is doing his lightning AoE, every time Vader is doing his AoE, you have Tarkin, as well as a couple other Empire and Sith allies that can really benefit from this and start generating a stupid amount of turn meter. The Palpatine turn meter train used to be an absolute force to be reckoned with when there weren't as many crazy dark side leaders as there are now, but it is still one of the absolute strongest Zetas in the game early. And if you're going to be getting Phoenix early, which I highly recommend, they're definitely the best early game faction to start with, you can use them, being rebels, to farm Palpatine right away. So you can go ahead and get Palpatine very early on in the game. He's going to be your best dark side leader for a long time. So definitely scoop this Zeta up as one of your first. It's going to really benefit your account with how it can hit Sith and Empire. And with that being said, you can actually make an Empire team using your Palpatine to go after the second Zeta I'm going to recommend, which is going to be R2-D2's Number Crunch. Now what this does is R2-D2 himself is going to gain a bunch of bonuses, little bonuses, depending on who his allies are. So he's going to gain some max protection with droids, some offense with Galactic Republic, some health with rebels, and some potency with resistance. Now what his Zeta does is it lets him give a portion of all those buffs he just got and give them back to his team. And this is going to make him very versatile and very useful, because he has some of the most tags in the game, and he can slot into any of these factions very nice. In the early to mid game that you're going to be in, he's probably going to be in your CLS team, in your Commander Luke team. And he is phenomenal there because he's going to use his Zeta to give everyone more potency. So you're going to be landing those debuffs easier, meaning Commander Luke's Zeta, which we are going to talk about in a little bit, is going to be even better. So he's versatile, he's cute, you love him. R2-D2 is hands down one of the best early Zetas. Now, number 3 on the list is going to be Bastila Shan. Now, she's kind of the counterpart to Palpatine in the fact that she's going to be your standalone, dominant, super good light side leader early on in the game. You can pick her up and farm her pretty quickly from a hard side and a fleet side battle. And her Zeta initiative is going to really transform your early game Jedi teams into just walls that are going to cause your opponents a whole hell of a lot of trouble to try to get through. So what she does is she's going to, or what the Zeta does, I should say, the Zeta is going to add an extra 150% bonus protection that she's going to give to all of your Jedi allies, and she's going to let your Jedi tanks taunt for 1 turn at the beginning of the battle. So she's going to set up a pre-taunting tank for probably your old Ben. That's probably, you're going to be running Old Ben or maybe Kanan at this point in the game. I would say you should get Bastila early and use her lead to farm a very early Jedi Master Yoda, and then go ahead and run something like Bastila, Yoda, Old Ben, Kanan, and Ezra, something like that. Or Jolie instead of Kanan. and make a really good PvP team early on in the game with your Jedis. So she's not the overall best Jedi leader because of Jedi Revan, who will be appearing toward the end of this list, or just in a few spots actually. But she is a phenomenal early game leader, and even once you have Jedi Revan, there are enough Jedi to go around where you can still make a second full team for Grand Arena with her leadership. So definitely worth picking up. And the next character we're going to talk about, number 4, is going to be Jolee Bindo, and his Zeta that looks pretty bad. Now this is the Big Daddy super revive ability of all revives in the game. This Zeta transforms Jolee into an annoying hindrance to an absolute problem that will lose the match for you if you leave him alone and let him revive all of his Jedi buddies. So it kind of has to do with how strong Jedi Revan is, that when Jolee hit the game with this Zeta, allowing him to res the Revan or the Yoda or both, after you've just spent time grinding through their armor and perhaps the revive that Revan gives, then you have to do another revive with Jolee. So he is one of, if not the best light side support character in the game, and the Zeta that lets him revive all Jedi allies and give them all crit immunity for 5 turns is a big reason why he is so good. And we're talking about Jedi, might as well talk about the Big Daddy Jedi Zeta, the General Zeta on Jedi Revan. So this guy here is, I mean, as you can see, it adds a paragraph worth of text to his already crazy powerful leader ability. So what this does is going to say whenever a Jedi attacks out of turn, they're going to recover 20% protection and deal more damage. And Revan can call allies to attack out of turn. Jolee has a call out of turn. Bastila has a call out of turn. So there are a lot of different ways to utilize just the offense up and the protection recovery alone. And it continues whenever a Jedi ally uses their basic, they on enemies with bonus protection, I should say, they're going to reduce their max health, which is stacking. So this is actually good against Bastila. And and it just gives everyone tenacity when you start the battle. But the big things in this are going to be the protection and damage that are going to go boosted when you start calling mainly your Yoda, which this whole Jedi team revolves around calling Master Yoda over and over and over again. So you're going to get a lot of use out of this Zeta. And I mean, Jedi Revan, he transforms the whole Jedi faction. Like, when he came out, he was the new Commander Luke. He was absolutely disgusting. One of the craziest leaders we've ever seen in this game. And just making everything he does even better with this Zeta is pretty much mandatory. The General Zeta is probably the most important Zeta for a Jedi team, simply because of the power and recovery in recovering protection and hitting stronger that it brings. So well worth the investment. When you get to the point where you have Jedi Revan, try and have at least 1 Zeta saved for him before you even get to him, if not 2. So the next character on the list that we need to talk about is going to be Commander Luke Skywalker. Now, he was the first super character. When Commander Luke came out, he was unquestionably the strongest character in the game. He does absolutely ridiculous things, and his Zeta on it binds all things is a big reason for that. So whenever he resists a detrimental effect, gains 5% protection. Great. Awesome. Not really why we're getting this Zeta, it's this last part that does work. So whenever Luke inflicts a debuff, he's going to gain 10% turn meter, and he's going to give 5% turn meter to the rest of his team. Now, this is important because his auto and his special. The auto is going to deal 2 debuffs when it swings, or the chance to deal 2 debuffs when it swings. Defense down and speed down. And if they already had defense down, he can stun them instead. Still nice, but you have the potential to inflict 2 debuffs with his auto, and another 2 debuffs with his ability. So if both of these were to theoretically stick, you're getting 20% turn meter for him and 10% turn meter for the whole team anytime either of these two abilities produces all the debuffs they're trying to. And even if you only get one debuff, it really starts adding up, especially if you have R2-D2, who gives rebels boost to their potency, meaning Luke is going to debuff faster, meaning the whole team's going to generate turn meter faster, which means he's going to be up faster to debuff faster, and the cycle continues. So he's kind of like a battery once he gets going, let alone the ability to recover his own health and protection with call to action. So yeah, the CLS Zeta, it binds all things. Very, very crucial for the Commander Luke Rebel team. I can't recommend the Zeta enough. It is bananas. And now let's talk about Raid Han, Mr. Han Solo. So he is the first raid character of the game. You get access to him pretty early on, potentially really early on if you are lucky enough to join a good guild, which is definitely a must if you're looking to progress in this game quickly. So once you've gotten into your first good guild, you'll be able to farm him from the Rancor raid. And his Zeta shoots first is one of the best pure offensive Zetas in the entire game. So he gets more crit chance, and then every time he uses his basic, he's guaranteed to use it again for half damage. Now that basic could crit, and if it crits again, it's going to deal more than half damage. And Han is a character where you're going to run a ton of crit chance and crit damage, so there's a good chance this 50% damage is going to look more like 70 to 80% on average, because he's going to be critting a lot of the time. Now, as far as just absolute glass cannon damage monsters, Raid Han was the first, and he is still, to this day, one of the absolute strongest powerhouse offensive units you can run, even without Chewbacca. You bring Chewbacca into the equation, those two as CLS are disgusting. They're one of the strongest offensive trios in the game, and they can put down things that really have no business being killed by them. But man, the Zeta on shoots first is, I mean, you could argue that might be the first Zeta you should go after. I mean, Palpatine, R2-D2, or Raid Han. Those were my first three Zetas, and those are the first three Zetas I recommend on your way to Commander Luke or getting Bastila Zeta on your way to Jedi Revan. But definitely more than worth the investment. And once you get this bad boy up to the relic levels, oof, he hits for a scary amount. So you will not regret Zetaing Han. He is well worth it. So the last couple we have to talk about are a little bit less impactful because they're not like big legendary type of characters. But I do think it's worth talking about Newt Gunray and his Zeta Viceroy's Reach. Now this one isn't the flashiest, but it says whenever a Separatist inflicts a debuff, they also deal 5% max health damage, which cannot be resisted or evaded. Can't be prevented. So your teams that are debuff heavy, which Separatists already are, think like Newt Gunray himself, or Django, or Dooku, or any of the other Separatists that are going to spam a lot of debuffs and stuns that allow you to control the board. Now, with this Zeta, not only are you controlling your opponent's units, but you're going to drain their health at the same time. And it is also not on his leader. So this can go, he can just be a piece in any Separatist team, and he's going to supercharge them. His, his dubious dealings granting extortion ability is bananas enough as it is. When you also add that giving that extortion, spreading that around, is now also draining enemy health, and you have yourself a really good dark side plug and play character that makes a lot of Separatists that were not super usable, a lot more usable, which definitely earns him at least a considerational spot on this list. Talzin, Mother Talzin. The Night Sisters, since their release, have consistently proven to be a really solid faction. Night Sisters have stood the test of time. They haven't really been changed too much, and they've become one of the absolute most dominant powerhouses in raids, let alone a nightmare to deal with in Grand Arena. And the Zeta on Mother Talzin is a big part of that. And now what this Zeta does is it says, whenever a Night Sister uses a basic attack, if a Night Sister ally has already died, it'll revive that ally and let them join in assisting for a little bit less damage on the auto attack. Now, if you happen to kill an enemy when you used an auto and you had a Night Sister buddy revive, and the enemy dies, that revived ally will stay alive. So it's a built-in resurrections on every character's auto, but it also brings characters that have really good auto attacks to assist. Something like Daka's auto that can stun. If you happen to lose your Daka first in a Night Sisters match, you can start reviving Daka for stun chances on every single auto until you kill something, then she bounces right back alive. Great Mother is one of the most impactful faction-defining Zetas, and it really makes the Night Sisters a pain in the ass to deal with. There is also the Ventress Zeta on her leadership, but it's... I don't know if I'd call it better or worse, but at least for early game players, I 100% recommend the Mother Talzin Zeta. It will really annoy your enemies, especially in Grand Arena, which is more and more important nowadays because you can farm a lot of Zeta mats from Grand Arena. So having an account that's more diverse with things like the Mother Talzin Zeta, even if you're not using her in a true arena, like original arena, can make you a lot of returns. Like that 20 Zeta mats can easily help you start recouping them back by winning a bunch of Grand Arena matches. So the last character on the top 10 that I really wanted to talk about is Geo-Brood Alpha. Now the Geonosians are not that hard to farm, especially if you focus on them. A lot of them are in Cantina, or you can simply just buy their shards. And before this guy came along, you would be a damn fool to do so. Geonosians were terrible, they were not sexy, they had no use in the game, and they hit like wet noodles. They were unusable. And then this guy came along, and he changed all of that. Just his kit alone, with how he constantly is equalizing all the Geonosians' health and protection, is bananas. You're essentially fighting against the entirety of all their health pools at once, making a lot of teams in the game really struggle, if not make them unable to take these guys out because of Geo-Brood Alpha. And now, with his third ability here, he ends up summoning a Geonosian tank, like a 6th unit, that's going to join the battle for you. And if you happen to Zeta his Queen's Will ability, that tank is going to start the battle already on the field with you, and he's going to be taunting. So it's a pre-taunting tank that is going to force your opponent to go after this 6th unit that isn't even one of the 5 main characters they're going to be trying to kill. It really secures just how good the team is when you force your opponent to not be able to go after those juicy characters they want to kill, like the Brood Alpha, who can keep respawning the tank if they can't get through it fast enough and kill the Alpha as well. Or maybe your Spy. You're saving up your Spy, hasn't gotten quite into stealth yet. Having this taunting tank will protect it. You know, their Darth Revan can't jump on it right away. It's a very safe defensive Zeta that you could run an arena if you get them early enough, but Grand Arena defense, Geos really shine, and they require your opponent to really swing down on them. You can run a pretty mediocre, like, gear 8 to 10 with this Zeta Geonosian team, and you will require your opponent to bring some of their heaviest firepower, like their Darth Revan, something like that, to be able to combat these guys. So they're not the most powerful Zeta, but this Zeta demands such an answer that it is well worth the investment to use from a defensive standpoint. Now there's one kind of honorable mention, the 11th Zeta, that wouldn't be terrible to go after early at all, and that's Bosk. He has unquestionably the best, most tankiest, craziest ship in the game. This can solo tank entire teams if they don't have the right ships to really go after the few weaknesses of the Houndstooth. But he has one of those leader Zetas where, especially early, it can really buff up the Bounty Hunter faction. And it also lets you acquire the legendary Chewbacca a lot easier. Chewbacca can be very difficult to get without the On the Hunt Zeta. So what this guy does is it says whenever any enemy suffers a debuff or resists a debuff, so essentially any time that one of your bounty hunters attempts to debuff an enemy, they either will or they won't. Either way, it's going to proc this Zeta. So any debuff that is attempted, all bounty hunters are going to gain 5% health and protection. So it's a battery Zeta that keeps your boys generated, keeps them full on health. Your opponent can take a few turns trying to whack them down. One IG-88 AoE, one Dengar AoE, Boba Fett AoE, Jango AoE, any of those. And your whole team could be back to virtually full health and protection. It's another one of those good defensive Zetas, kind of along the lines of the Brood Alpha, but you can use the Bounty Hunters to go get your Chewbacca. The Houndstooth is an amazing ship. And the Bounty Hunters themselves are a good defensive team. They definitely demand, not to the extent of the GOs, but they demand a pretty good answer. Jedi Training Rey is a great counter to the Bounty Hunters. And that's pretty good. If you can get them to use a legendary or a journey character and a journey team to take out your 0 legendary Bounty Hunter team, sounds like a win to me. So this Zeta forces your opponent to come up with a very strong answer for a middle-of-the-road team. So those are going to be the top 10 Zetas, as well as that honorable mention that you really can't go wrong with any of these. I would say it's probably best to start with R2-D2, Raid Han, maybe Bastila, Palpatine. It depends on if you're working towards CLS first or if you're going to work toward Jedi Revan first. And that'll kind of depend on where you're going to put your first couple Zetas. But either way, I think this is a really solid 10. Any way you go with it, you're going to love these Zetas. They're going to serve you from the day you get them till the day you stop playing the game. They're all still relevant today, whether it be an arena or grand arena. So if you like the video, this was my first Star Wars video ever, and I very much intend to keep making more for you. So the next one I'm thinking about doing is going to be sort of an opposite list to this, like a top 10 Zetas to avoid. Pretty important, almost equally as important as knowing which ones to really go for, or which ones to stay away from, at least in the early game. So that, as well as just a general farming guide, now that the journey guide is out. I think an updated farming guide that is kind of more conducive to how open you can really go with it now is going to be. So I'm going to make that in the next couple days. So feel free to, or please, subscribe if you like the video. And I'll be getting a few more videos out in the next week for you. So have a good rest of your day, and I'll see you guys in a little bit.